Hi everyone, I'm Dr Nadine Hamilton from Love Your Pet, Love Your Vet. Welcome to our brand new mini-series of webinars that we're bringing you for the health and well-being of the veterinary community. Today we're going to be talking to the magnificent Audra Starkey, who is a nutritionist. She is an author, an accredited trainer and a shift work veteran, and she's going to be sharing with you some of her tips and strategies around sleep and nutrition and having those self-care strategies for veterinary professionals. So over the next 45 or 50 minutes or so, I'm going to let Audra take the stage and share this really valid information with you, and then we'll have a little bit of time to come back in and chat at the very end of the recording. So without any further ado, I shall hand over to Audra and welcome you, and look forward to actually listening myself and gaining some benefits from the webinar. So.
Thank you so much, Nadine, for that lovely introduction. That was very kind of you. And yes, so you can just sit back and relax and
I will.
and tune into what I have to say as well. But firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your webinar series. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to contribute where I can to help your your veterinary professionals. So, like this, the actual title says on the screen, I'm going to be talking all about sleep and nutrition, but from a self-care strategy perspective, because we might not think of necessarily sleep and nutrition as a form of self-care. There's a lot of different ways to do self-care out there, but obviously for me, nutrition is my background, but I also have a particularly focus on sleep as well, and which is why I wanted to present this presentation today. But first and foremost, I guess I have to put in a little bit of a disclaimer that the training that I'm about to share with everyone today is for general information only. It's not designed to be prescriptive advice, because we are all quite unique, and that's where obviously I would recommend that if you've got any particular concerns, that you do see your own particular healthcare practitioner. Alrighty, so self-care, as I said, we've got two parts to it, and the first one is with nutrition, or from a nutrients perspective, because good food and their nutrients is actually what keeps us alive. They supply the cells to run all of the many biochemical pathways in our body that are responsible for things like overall great health, great energy, which I think is something that we're all, striving to have, is that good energy. Also, though, at the same time, having that calm mood, and of course, to better sleep. And we can only, as I'll get into detail as we go along, we can only really get these nutrients from real whole foods as opposed to the processed stuff. This is why it's just so incredibly important. Then the second part is we've got nutrients, and then we've got is sleep. Sleep is definitely a big, really important thing that we need to be focusing on as a form of self-care. And I've pulled this quote from a great book by Professor Matthew Walker, who is a neuroscientist and sleep researcher of over 20 odd years of why we sleep. And according to Matthew, that there is not one major organ within the body or process within the brain that isn't enhanced by sleep or detrimentally impaired when we don't get enough. So it's just a little bit of highlighting of just how critically important it is on our health. But unfortunately, though, sometimes our sleep does get pushed to the side a little bit when it comes to our self-care. Which brings me to something that I wanted to make everyone aware of that you're probably not aware of, but actually late last year, the Australian government actually launched a world first parliamentary inquiry into sleep health awareness, basically to find out how much sleep everyone is getting or not getting, really. And it is a big 181-page document that you can actually access it online. If you wish, it will definitely put you to sleep if you're needing something to help with sleep onset. But it's a great, a really good initiative that was brought on. But I wanted to pull one particular recommendation out of it in that they said that sleep is a crucial element in the maintenance of health and well-being. But despite this, sleep receives far less attention than nutrition and exercise in current healthcare and policy settings. And this definitely rings true, because I think we hear a lot when we think about health and well-being, we do hear a lot about nutrition and exercise, which is a wonderful thing. It's really important, but poor little sleep kind of gets, has almost sort of been forgotten, or not really given the priority that it deserves. But it's really, in importance, it's right up there with the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. All right, so let's talk about sleep, or improving our sleep. So first I wanted to share this little insight that I have, a bit of a quote, and it's: when we don't eat well, we don't feel great, but when we don't sleep well, we can barely function. And for all of you watching this right now, I just want you to sort of sit on those words again. And I'm going to say it again to reinforce it. When we don't eat well, we don't feel great. But when we don't sleep well, we can barely function. I just want you to understand the distinct difference between the two, because we know when we eat a greasy hamburger and chips, afterwards we don't feel the best, but we're okay. But when you don't get enough sleep, that it really does affect us on a cellular level and in so many different ways. There is actually research that does show that even just one sleepless night can actually raise our anxiety levels by about 30%, which is a lot. This study that was published in the journal Nature Human Behaviour, and they identified it was actually the non-rapid eye movement, or the slow wave part of our sleep architecture, that sleep cycle, that is when neural oscillations become highly synchronized, and heart rate drops and blood pressure drops. So it just shows just how critically important that it can be as a way to help with things like anxiety. And the wonderful thing about sleep is that it's free, it's a natural thing, it's not a pharmaceutical kind of medicine, it's just something that that we can do ourselves to help reduce that anxiety. Research also does show there's an absolute connection between insufficient sleep and how it affects our immune system. And this study really looked at the vulnerability to being more prone to developing things like viruses and bacteria, because insufficient sleep literally suppresses our immune system. As it says in that in this research, that prolonged sleep curtailment actually invokes production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, chronic low-grade inflammation, and also produces immunodeficiency. So this is just from not getting enough sleep. So again, there's some hints for us to kind of be aware of just how important sleep is on our health and from a self-care perspective. And another one is for those of you who might be struggling with losing weight, or if we haven't had enough sleep, it actually affects our appetite regulating hormones. So things like leptin and ghrelin. So leptin is a hormone that is stored in our fat cells and sends a signal to our brain telling us when we're feeling full. And then we have another hormone called ghrelin, which is released in our stomach, that sends a message to our brain telling us that we're hungry. It's this beautifully timed orchestra almost. But the thing is, when we haven't had enough sleep, all of those hormones get skewed. So ghrelin gets suppressed and leptin gets raised. So basically when you haven't had enough sleep, it can lead you to kind of overeating, food. And that's just because you haven't actually had enough sleep. Another one I wanted to point out is that if we haven't had enough sleep, it affects our relationships. If we, it can lead us to say and do things that we wouldn't ordinarily do had we had enough sleep. And it's why I always recommend, for people that, maybe you haven't had that great sleep and you're just about to get into an argument with a spouse or a workmate or something, it's to just park it, get that sleep, or have that opportunity to sleep, and then take up that where you wanted to discuss that topic, because it really can affect how we actually react and say things, which is why I absolutely love this diagram that I found, or this illustration showing that, sorry for what I said when I was tired. I was presenting at a nurses conference of over 100 people late last year, and I got everybody in the whole room to stand up and give each other a hug, which unfortunately we can't do at this present moment in time. But it just to, you know, hug each other's workmates to say, I'm sorry, I may have overreacted when I did and said something that I wouldn't ordinarily have done, you know, had we had enough sleep. And I think we can all kind of relate to it. But I just thought this picture really captured it beautifully. So at the end of the day, everything comes back to sleep. So I wanted to use, again, this diagram as to show as an illustration. So if you've got a table in front of us and each leg of that table represents sleep, and then we put things like nutrition and exercise and stress and weight and so forth, if we were to put those things sitting on that table, but then I come along and I yank out one of the legs of that table, what's going to happen is that everything on that table is going to slide off. So, meaning, if we haven't had enough sleep, it definitely affects our nutritional choices. It affects our ability to want to get off the couch and do any exercise. It impacts on our resilience, our ability to be able to cope with stress, and our weight, as I mentioned before, and our overall mood and mental health, and most notably our immune system. Like, it's just that critically important to our well-being. So quite simply, there's not one area of your life that is not affected by sleep. So I'm hoping by now that you've, you know, realised just how important it is, particularly from your self-care perspective. Although you might be sitting there and you might think, but Audra, I'm fine. I can quite easily run on 4 to 6 hours of sleep, because I've heard clients tell me this before. Well, I do want to share something that, according to the research, that yes, there is a very small percentage of the population that can run on, you know, around 4 to 6 hours sleep. And that is because they actually have a genetic mutation of the DEC2 gene. So what it really means is that their brain is able to undergo a certain brainwashing through the lymphatic system. They're able to remove a lot of the toxic waste products and build up that's been happening when they're awake, but they're able to do it in a much more quicker or more efficient manner. That's the good news. The bad news is it actually only applies to about 1% of the population. So I doubt that it's actually anybody that is watching this webinar right now. So there's something to sort of keep in mind. So let's give you some action steps to help to improve your sleep, because I want to give you a little bit of a backstory, I guess, as to why sleep and why nutrition is so important. But at the end of the day, I also want to give you some good takeaway strategies to start to implement into your lifestyle. But please, please keep this in mind, because some of the things that I might be sharing with you, you might have potentially heard it before, which is wonderful. But if that's the case, are you actually implementing it though? Because knowing and doing can be two completely different things. And that common sense is actually not common practice, yet it can have the most profound impact on our health. I've seen this time and time again over the years, that sometimes we are looking for things that almost, I guess we struggle or have a difficult time accepting a simple strategy sometimes. But I just want you to kind of keep that keep an open mind to what I'm about to share with you. So the first thing on how to improve your sleep comes about by asking yourself some tough questions. And the first one is, have you created a life where you think you don't need much sleep? Pretty tough question, and something that we all need to ask, because let's face it, we definitely are living in a very crazy, busy society today. We've got a lot of commitments, a lot of expectations and things that we need to be doing, and so forth. But is your sleep being suffering as a result of that? So maybe it does mean sitting down and having a few conversations with your family members or so forth, just finding ways to maybe delegate things a little bit, just so that you do get that opportunity to sleep. Which is where it also leads to, where does sleep really sit on your list of priorities? So for example, is it like over here on the left hand side where you put work first, then nutrition, which is great. I always get excited when I hear people are doing this, and then it's exercise. But poor little sleep gets kind of pushed down to the bottom of the ladder, when really we should be aiming more on the right-hand side. So we put sleep first, then nutrition, then exercise, and then work, because our ability to be able to work and function, even just in our whole entire life, improves out of sight if we've addressed those three things at the top. Now, as a nutritionist, sometimes people get a little bit perplexed as to why I would put sleep above nutrition. The best way I could describe that or illustrate it is by saying that if hypothetically you were to not eat for 2 to 3 days, which, can I just say, is not the new diet of 2020 that I'm recommending at all. But if you didn't eat for 2 to 3 days, after that time, no doubt you would feel tired, lethargic, you would have lost a bit of muscle mass and a bit of weight. But generally speaking, you're going to be okay. But if you don't sleep for 2 to 3 days, you would barely be able to function, and you'd even begin to hallucinate. So again, that's Mother Nature giving us this huge clue as to just how critically important it is on our health. So to ask yourself, where are you putting it in that list of priorities as something that's so important to your health? The second thing that we can do is to minimize overstimulation, which can be a bit challenging in today's world, because we really do have so many distractions and temptations today, way more than we ever did 20 years ago, that are affecting our sleep. You know, we've got so many gadgets that are stimulating us that didn't exist, you know, say 20 years ago. And this actually leads to our poor little nervous systems becoming so overstimulated that it's very hard to sort of wind down and relax afterwards. But at the end of the day, sleep is a form of relaxation. And in order to sleep and sleep well, we must be relaxed. So I've put that in bold, and I've put it in capital letters to really reinforce my point, is that sleep is a form of relaxation. And in order to be able to sleep and sleep well, we must be relaxed. And I think this is where sometimes a lot of us are kind of missing that link, I guess, because we're so kind of busy. We're running around doing 100 things, 100 kilometres an hour, and then we jump into bed and we wonder why we're not relaxed. So that's something to really keep in mind as being important. So is this you? Do you recognise that? And I think we can all put up our hand that we're guilty of this scene at some particular moment in time, that's for sure. However, the only problem with this situation, or for this girl in particular, is because she's got that iPad that's with a light that's actually reflecting right into her eyes, is what it's doing is it's raising cortisol, so it's raising that stress hormone cortisol, but at the same time it's blunting melatonin. Now, melatonin is our sleep regulating hormone. So in other words, by having that light going into her eyes, it's sending a message to her brain that it is daytime and that is not time to be sleeping anytime soon. So those two hormones actually work in opposite each other. You can't have high cortisol and high melatonin, or low cortisol, low melatonin. It's one or the other. And melatonin, making sure that you've got sufficient amount of melatonin is really important for good quality sleep. It's why I actually recommend, excuse me, is to remove your mobile phone from your bedroom and replace it with a good old-fashioned alarm clock. Now, of course, this is a little bit difficult for those of you who might be on call. If that's the case, I would at least recommend that you put your mobile phone at least about 6 feet away from your head. But ideally, if you can actually remove your mobile phone completely, and again, I have actually recommended this for clients, and this one simple strategy has been a game changer in improving their sleep. because exposure to an electronic device, it's actually not just the light, but it's also that electromagnetic field that is around the device that has been shown to disrupt sleep. Remember, all of these electromagnetic fields and radiations, this is stuff that we can't see, but there is more and more research coming out that it actually is having a big impact on our health, and sleep is just one of them. So the third thing I want to talk about kind of leads to what I alluded to before, is that we need to focus on relaxation and not sedation. Now, I think for so many of us, we tend to start our days with fire our days up with coffee, and then we might finish it with a glass of alcohol. And again, I'm not here to say never drink alcohol, again, not at all, but it's just being mindful that a lot of us use it as a way to, I guess, to help us to relax. And it does have that sedative effect, absolutely. However, alcohol, what it does is it tends to disrupt or lead to a fragmented sleep. It disrupts a part of the sleep cycle called the rapid eye movement phase of the sleep cycle, which is important for learning and memory. But it's why you will tend to wake up feeling not great if you've gone to bed, drinking alcohol. And even a lot of prescription medications also have that similar effect, the benzodiazepines and so forth. That's why they're not great. They're not ideal for long-term use. So it's having that awareness of their mechanisms of actions, is that they might help to sedate you, but we also need to appreciate that it's like a drug-induced sleep isn't going to lead to real sleep, and we want to really encourage your body to be able to get into that sleep process on its own and feel relaxed, just like that guy on the left is here. And there's a lot of ways that you can, increase your feelings of relaxation. There's a lot of research out there to show that things like yoga is a great way to do that. And I love doing things like this child's pose, like this lady's doing as a demonstration up there. If you just do that 5 to 10 minutes just before bed, can really help to relax. As I said before, I think a lot of us tend to run around doing 200 things an hour, and then we jump into bed and we wonder why we can't sleep. It's because we're not relaxed. But if we just take the time to, put in an extra 5 to 10 minutes just before bed to do something like this, like a child's pose, will help your body to relax, as will this great pose called the feet up the wall pose. It's exactly what it is. Again, this does wonders at helping to calm a nervous system down, because it quite literally helps to move that nervous system out of the fight and flight and into the rest and digest, or the parasympathetic arm of the nervous system. Also does other things like reduces swelling in the legs and feet. So if you've been on your feet all day, and what I really like is that it helps to quieten a busy mind, because I think a lot of us have these really busy minds where we find it very difficult to switch off. And that this particular pose does that as well. It helps you to really also get into the deep breathing, just to slow that nervous system down. And it's a great simple technique that you can do, particularly if you've had like a really sort of stressful shift, and that you can do just before going to bed. The fourth thing to help with sleep is actually to eat and drink to help you to sleep better, because good nutrition will lead to good quality sleep. And that's because the nutrients from our food that I alluded to right at the beginning, the nutrients from our food, that good whole foods, are utilised to make neurotransmitters in our brain, which help us to sleep restoratively. And that's what we want. We want that beautiful, minimally interrupted sleep. And one way I can explain this is by illustrating the sleep melatonin pathway. Basically how melatonin tends to get formed. So from the protein that we eat, gets broken down into amino acid tryptophan, then converted to serotonin, and then eventually melatonin, which is what we want to be able to sleep. However, in order for each phase of that process to occur, for example, the protein from the food that we eat to get converted to tryptophan, the body needs sufficient amounts of zinc, vitamins B1 and B6. For tryptophan to be converted to serotonin, the body needs sufficient amount of zinc, magnesium, calcium, iron, vitamins B3, B6, C, and folate. And then for the final one is that we need magnesium, calcium, and vitamin B5. So you can see how critically important nutrients is for us to be able to get that really good, good quality sleep. And the thing is, a lot of highly refined and processed food will not contain any of those nutrients. You can only acquire those nutrients from, you know, the food that you're eating, although sometimes, you know, people do need to take supplementation when signs of deficiency. But my point that I want to make is that in order for all of these biochemical reactions to kind of occur within the body, it really does rely on nutrients from the food that we eat. And I want to pull this quote from the beautiful Dr. LYPLYV, who is a nutritionist and biochemist here in Australia, which I adore. And this just sums it up beautifully. It was, when your diet is full of stimulants like caffeine and refined sugar and devoid of nutrients, your body cannot make the necessary hormones for calm and to create your sleep hormones. I think we know when we see that picture on the right, when it comes to, I guess, you know, a lot of refined foods and junk foods, our initial thing is, yes, it will affect, highly likely it's going to affect our waistline, and highly likely that it's going to affect our overall health and well-being. But a lot of people don't sort of put two and two together as to how it actually may impact on our sleep, and it most certainly can, just as I explained why before. This study that was published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine actually even identified that diets that were low in fibre but high in unhealthy saturated fats and sugar led to poor sleep. So basically it took people longer to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep, and they had more awakenings, you know, that broken sleep, which is what we all don't want at all. When we jump into bed, we want to be able to sleep soundly all the way through. So that was just from, the types of diets that they had, low in fibre and high in saturated fat. So what does more fibre look like? Not on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, I know there's some probably nice looking donuts snuck in there that you can see, and some biscuits. But on the left-hand side, we've got a beautiful a dish of a lot of plant foods. And that's where fibre is located. It's the undigestible part or portion of plants that is fibre. And we can only get it from eating more whole real foods. So we've got the beautiful pumpkins and the chickpeas and capsicums and tomatoes and avocados there, and you can just see it's all colourful because a lot of that fibre also supports our gut microbiome, which are responsible for producing a lot of the neurotransmitters as well, for that calm and for us to be able to relax. So if you want to sleep better, you must nourish your body with real foods. Real foods and their nutrients are important for gut health and in the regulation of sleep cycles, balancing our hormones, and in your ability to stay calm. So I've really just noticed that when sort of clients will go from a diet that is highly refined and processed to having more of the whole foods, is that they actually do begin to feel calmer. They feel less anxious and can sleep better, obviously, because their body is getting the right fuel and the right nutrients to do what it needs to do. So yeah, just something to be really mindful of. And just quickly, when it comes to, I guess, the drink side of things, I'm sure probably most of you would be aware that, yes, caffeine can definitely impact on our ability to be able to sleep. This study, though, looked at the different types, the different times of when somebody or when the participants actually had caffeine, even up to 6 hours before bed, and that showed that drinking caffeine 6 hours before led to a 1 hour loss of sleep. And now that's huge. And of course, this does vary, though, from individual to individual. The caffeine's half-life, it varies anywhere between 6 and 8 hours, meaning after those 6 to 8 hours, you've still got half the caffeine still buzzing in your system. So that's why it can actually impact on your ability to sleep. It also does depend on your genes, you know, on how well your liver can actually to be able to break down the caffeine. So it can vary, but it's something to be really important to be aware of, that I have, had clients say to me, oh, I'll drink a cup of coffee before I go to bed and I'll sleep fine. But I doubt that if we were to sort of set them up to a machine to see how good quality their sleep is probably not going to be great, because they've got that caffeine kind of buzzing around in their nervous system. Which is why green tea can be a great alternative, besides the energy drinks and the coffee and so forth, because it actually contains something called L-theanine, which is a compound that actually helps to, so it actually works, has an anti-anxiety effect. That is actually its mechanisms of action, so you don't experience that jitteriness that we tend to get from the coffee and the energy drinks, and even by replacing, say for example, the coffee with green tea, has even been shown to help with cognitive performance and increasing your alertness. So if you're worried that you might not have that clarity, again, this study has shown that you will definitely still get it, but you won't get that sort of jitteriness effects that you can get if you're having quite a lot of caffeine. So that's sleep. Now I want to talk about nutrition. So sleep, I think we've realised how important it is as a form of self-care, and we've given you some strategies there to help to improve your sleep. Now I want to talk about nutrition. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, good food and their nutrients is what keeps us alive, literally. The body needs all these nutrients to be able to perform all the biochemical reactions that happen instantaneously over and over throughout our whole body. And it leads to things like improving our health and energy and so forth. But a real interesting thing that has started to come out in the last sort of few years is an area of research called nutritional psychiatry, where there is this growing discipline that focuses on the use of food and supplements to provide essential nutrients as part of an integrative or alternative treatment for mental health disorders. Now, I could probably do a whole entire presentation just on this one subject, but I just wanted to bring it, to your attention, to be aware of the mental health implications in a positive way. Good food can help with things like that. And a lot of it has to do with its, the good whole foods is feeding our gut microbiome, the trillions of microscopic bugs that live in our gut. And then we have this brain-gut connection that works both ways. So it's sending all these signals to your brain to help you to feel calm and less anxious and so forth. But more and more research is coming out about that. But as I said, I could do a whole presentation on that. But for the purpose of just this particular webinar, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So what does optimal nutrition look like? Well, again, this is a very much a generalized answer, but you always want to make sure that you incorporate a lot of plant-based foods into your diets, colourful. They contain a lot of antioxidants, polyphenols, or heaps of kind of nutrients to support your health and well-being. I'm not saying to not eat chicken or fish or anything like that, absolutely not. That's good too if you're not a vegetarian, but just predominantly if you can make sure the actual Australian regulations are to have 2 serves of fruit a day and 5 serves of vegetables. But I think a staggering, less than 10% of Australians are actually doing that. So 2 serves of vegetables, 2 serves of fruit, 5 serves of vegetables. And again, so we can go back to this common sense. It's not common practice, but it can make a massive impact on our health. This is kind of one of those things. We also want to make sure we're having minimally processed food as much as we can, because it doesn't contain all those really important nutrients that I spoke about before. Also, having a diet that is varied. I think we can all get into that or fall into that trap, where you make the same things over and over again. You eat the same types of food because that's kind of what you know. But having a varied diet is actually really important, because again, it's going to feed the different type of gut bacteria in our gut, which have various different functions. With such as producing vitamins and short-chain fatty acids to help with reducing inflammation. And it can only get that by having a variety of foods from your diet. And again, that leads to foods that also are anti-inflammatory for the same kind of thing. Making sure that we're not having that processed food, because a lot of foods contain a very high in omega-6 fatty acids, which can be quite inflammatory, and really we need to be having more omega-3 fatty acids that are found in, you know, fish and avocados and olive oil and things like that, because inflammation is actually one of the leading causes of a lot of chronic health complaints. So it's important to make sure that your diet doesn't have too much of that. So some actual specific action steps that I wanted to share with you is, number one, again, taking back and looking at a big picture here, is just to always, of course, make sure that you do schedule in some meal breaks. It's really important that you do make sure that you are taking your break, because if you don't schedule them, often it doesn't happen. And that can lead to a lot of blood sugar crashes, making you tired and hangry, and depleted of nutrients. Again, I'm going to keep harping on the word nutrients. It's just so important. Secondly, is to use your meal breaks wisely, because sometimes we know when we get a break, we don't know if we're going to get that opportunity to get another break. So when we're getting that break, we want to, I guess, make sure we're giving it getting the most bang for our meal break buck. And also, so, eating in a way that you don't need to continually eat, because you may not have that real opportunity to do so. And this is because that will help to ensure that your brain has a steady supply of fuel throughout the day. You want to make sure that your brain is getting enough nutrients, sugars, and so forth, so that you can maintain that clarity to be able to go about your day. How we do this is that we focus on having foods that leave you feeling fuller for longer, or, enhancing our satiety. So as an example, when you have things like just carbohydrates on their own, and sugar and fruit just on their own, usually after an hour, generally speaking, we end up being hungry. That's why if we have for breakfast like a cup of coffee and a processed muffin, usually an hour later we'll be wanting to seek out some more because we're hungry again. However, if you have each of your meals contains proteins and healthy fats, what that's going to do is actually leave you feeling fuller for longer, and for around 4 to 6 hours. So this is where it comes back to getting that most bang for your meal break buck here, by being quite strategic in the foods that you are actually eating. So aiming always, if you can, to incorporate some kind of healthy fats in every meal that you're having. And again, these are just examples. We've got some avocados there, chia seeds, nuts, seeds, olives, cheese, eggs, Greek yogurt. And also always in trying to incorporate some serving of protein in every meal as well. Again, things like eggs, even broccoli is high in protein, nuts and seeds, chicken, lentils, cottage cheese, whatever you love to eat. Of course, that's important. You want to be able to enjoy what you're eating, but always making sure that every meal contains healthy fats, and protein is going to make you feel fuller for longer. And I'll give an example here. This is just an example of a breakfast, for example. So if you were to sit down and have just a bowl of porridge on its own, that's pure carbohydrates, an hour later, you're actually going to be quite hungry. However, if you had that same bowl of porridge, but you threw things on it, like some nut butter and some Greek yogurt and some chia seeds, things like that, it even looks more visually appealing, doesn't it, than the one on the left. But that will leave you feeling much fuller for so much longer. So you're less likely to kind of want to snack on things that, may not be the healthiest of choices. And that's really the big key kind of, I guess, takeaway that I wanted to share from this webinar, is to really be strategic with what you're eating so that it lasts you for longer, provides you with the fuel and nutrients, so that you don't get tempted to eat the naughty stuff. So for example, at lunch, okay, I'm going to put a big cross through that one again. Examples, having things like vegetarian muffins or mini frittatas. I mean, the world is your oyster, what you actually put in a little frittata. You're going to have obviously the protein from the eggs. You can put in cheese and other different types of vegetables, or things like stuffed capsicums. You can put mince in them or lentils. You know, these are something that you can make in advance, and they will really leave you feeling full for quite a while. Other lunch examples, you know, and even if you've only got a short opportunity to eat in some cases, these are just examples of like a little lunch pack. And I actually pulled this from a website. Again, I wanted to provide you with some resources after watching this webinar that you can go on and look at. This is from the Cancer Council Healthy Lunchbox website. One on the left's like a beef kofta and tabbouleh wrap, or sushi with hummus. I mean, even if you've only got 5 minutes, in some circumstances, even if you just had a few bites of whatever is from either of those little lunch boxes, it's going to provide you with some really good nourishment to sustain you. And we need to be looking at swapping the snacks that we're having. And I know that I think most workplaces in Australia and all over the world, there is usually a couple of lolly jars hidden in the drawers somewhere, but it's pure sugar. It's not going to really provide you with much nutrients. Some different options for you again. So I've got some sourdough bread here with a bit of beetroot hummus and some radish and cucumbers. Again, like that, avocados sliced in half. We've got some tomatoes, cottage cheese, and so forth. Down the bottom here, and again, this one was pulled from that same website, the Healthy Lunchbox Cancer Council website. We've got some celery sticks with some cottage cheese and sultanas, or even some eggs here on the left-hand side. You know, these are really, really healthy snacks. They're going to keep you going. More options. So instead of the Mars bar, we've got up here on the top left-hand side, having something more like homemade bliss balls. And there's, again, that website to refer to. There's a lot of different recipe ideas that you can get for bliss balls. Again, we can make all different types and versions of them. Instead of the packets of chips and biscuits, having vegetable muffins, or making your own roasted dips that come with a pita bread or anything you can have as well. A great things that are going to leave you feeling full. And just this website I also wanted to share with you. It's I love it. I actually wish I'd thought of it myself. A low effort and healthy dinner recipes. I think it's great. Low effort. I think we can all put our hand up after a busy day at work where that's what we're wanting. They've got some great ideas for different types of dinner recipes. You know, salmon and asparagus, garlic chicken and cauliflower rice. It's about making things easy for you. That's what you want to do. You want to set yourself up so that you're less likely to fail, with some not so great healthy choices. So that just means, just making sure that you've got some great recipes on hand, or you've done some prep beforehand. That way that you're going to ensure that you eat well. So just to summarise these sleep and nutrition self-care strategies for you. Number one is really look at, seriously, are you prioritising your sleep? Because I think for most of us, we're actually not doing that. As I said, we kind of push it down that ladder. It can be the last thing of importance. But as I alluded right at the beginning, it is so incredibly important on our health and well-being for so many ways. Minimising overstimulation is going to help with your sleep. Focusing on doing more relaxation strategies instead of sedating. I've just really shared yoga there, but there's other ways, there's meditations, having a hot bath. There's so many different ways you can relax your body. Eating and drinking to enhance your sleep. A lot of people don't put that connection between what they eat and how they sleep or don't sleep. Of course, scheduling your meal breaks so that you do take them, making sure that you include protein and healthy fats in every meal that you have, and always incorporating lots of plant-based foods into your diet. Just by having more salads and vegetables, it is a game changer for most people in how they feel, and obviously having less of the minimally processed foods. So I was going to leave it open for questions, which I think, Nadine, we're going to perhaps leave that open for something to people want to follow up with.
Yes, so if anyone has any questions, you can pop that into the comments box, or get in touch with us, with me directly through Love Your Pet, Love Your Vet, or I think Audra will have your contact details as well, so people can get in touch with you directly as well. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them here, and we will be able to respond and get back to you and try and get some answers for you on that.
Yeah. Excellent. Terrific. Alrighty. And on that note, if anybody wanted more information or where to find me for more information, my website's healthyshiftworker.com. I have a podcast, I've written a book, I do have an online course, and there's my email there if anybody would like to contact me. But I guess I wanted to leave the webinar with just, I guess, putting out a question, one last question that I want to put forward to all of you. Is it, do you care enough about yourself to take care of yourself? Now really ask yourself that question. Do you care enough about yourself to take care of yourself? Because that's the most important thing that we need to, I guess, take on board, is that, you know, we do deserve self-care. We are really important, but we need to acknowledge that. You do an amazing job with what you do at work, but having that, knowing that you need to be taking care of yourself is super important. And when you understand that, and then you start making better, I guess, choices and decisions around that, that can be, you know, the catalyst to kind of set things on the right track for everybody. Because at the end of the day, it's incredibly easy not to look after ourselves, but it's for this very reason why we must. And of course, your patients need you to be healthy too. So I'd like to say, on behalf of, you know, not just being somebody that would bring a pet to your clinic, is that, you know, as pet owners, we are very appreciative for what you do. And I think, you know, these gorgeous pictures of a cute little dog and a cat also kind of hit home to, at the end of the day, you know, that's why you got into the industry that you do. You do an amazing thing at what you do. And I think on behalf of all the pet owners and the pets, we're very appreciative of what you do, but we also need you to make sure that you take care of yourself too. So that's it for the webinar. Thank you so much, Nadine. I hope your listeners find that enjoyable, and yeah, thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Audra. I have just got like my desk full here of little sticky notes as I was making notes as you were going. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gold. And particularly there were some points there that I got. And I might try just, do you, and I love those pictures as well. Do you just want to flip back a couple of slides just to your contact details, just while I make some comment? That way people can write down your contact details. We've got those there. Just so that they have got that opportunity, just so they know where to find you as well. But I think, and I know I've got these in all different orders, but particularly the things that stood out to me, and like with the lack of sleep, you know, obviously as a psychologist, I see it from the anxiety, the stress, the depression, the mood side, and seeing that connection with nutrition, seeing it with sleep and the effects that that can have on our mood, and how you've explained that, because I've had it explained to me and I'm like, it makes complete sense. I can totally relate to that. If you're not sleeping, why you do start feeling hungry the next day and you want to just reach for everything. So you explaining that, you know, with the leptin and the ghrelin and what's actually going on there, it's like, good, we've got someone technical that's explained it, but it also validates the things that, you know, I say to people, because I think it's really important to notice that sometimes we might be feeling anxious or stressed. Is it necessarily something psychological, or is this going back to our nutrition?
Yeah.
And that's a really, really big thing that I think is really something that needs to be looked at. And you also touched on that as well, and I know it's in here, but the gut-brain axis. And I guess to even go one step further, which you're probably already aware of, there's some research that's been developed. It came out a couple of years ago by a psychologist to suggest that with depression in particular, it's not just that chemical imbalance in our brain. And like when I was trained and did my training in psychology, it was like, oh, it's this chemical imbalance in the brain. That's why we have, you know, these levels of depression. But now there's research suggesting that maybe that's not the case at all. And it's this disconnect, I like, between the gut-brain axis. And I think when you can explain that, like our happy chemicals are formed in our gut. And if our gut's not healthy, how can that be feeding our brain and giving us those happy, feel-good chemicals, and vice versa? So I think all of that is just, it's just pure gold, I think. But I think it's also comforting to know that maybe this is food that is creating the mood. as well as, you know, obviously like our mood, sometimes we do want to reach for those sugary, quick, you know, giving us a lift kind of foods to feel good. But if we can eat more nutritiously, that actually could be stabilizing our mood more so than the other way around. So I think there's a really big connection with all of that. I think, yeah, and just some of these little things that, like I know you talked about alcohol, like it's one of the things, one of, I guess, the questions that I ask when I'm working with clients is, how's your appetite and how are your sleep? Because we know they're two of the first things that get affected when there's something psychological going on. And that connection with alcohol, that some people think, oh, well, I'll just have something to drink, it'll help me get to sleep. That might knock them out initially, but again, that good quality sleep is unlikely to be happening. So, yeah, I loved that. Again, I've just got all these little pieces of snippets that I really like, that I thought I can't just leave it at that. Like I could just listen to this forever. The pathways. And I know myself, you know, if I have something that doesn't agree with me, and like I do suffer from food intolerances, so I have to be super careful, but the quality of my sleep, depending on what I've eaten, 100%. And that was sort of a connection I started making a few years ago when I was like, oh, I notice if I have something with this in it, I don't have the best sleep. But if I have something that, you know, I would call as clean, I have a great sleep. So sort of those sort of things. And I think, like when you're talking about that sleep and melatonin pathways, balancing the hormones and keeping us calm, you know, just makes so much sense and is so easy. Really, by just changing the input can definitely have a positive effect on the output.
Yeah, I love that. I love that very simple equation. Very simple equation. But I think you also nailed it too, Nadine, by just alluding to before, you know, for example, the food tolerances and that. But it's also sort of having that awareness of when you eat something and it doesn't agree with you. Like I think we're blunting that, like we're ignoring it. We need to start listening to our bodies more.
Absolutely.
And having that awareness, because we really are the CEO of our own health.
100%.
Yeah, it's just taking, I guess, making that decision and just starting to listen to, you know, what I can eat. It probably doesn't affect me, but what you eat does affect you. And
absolutely. Oh, and it just allows. We had something the other night, and it was like gluten-free because I eat gluten-free. And then I just found it really, I struggled to be waking up. I was nearly like that brain fog. And I'm like, what else was actually in this? You know, because it seemed relatively healthy. And again, just because it's gluten-free doesn't equal non-inflammatory and like high quality. And, you know, it seemed like a really healthy meal. And I'm like, no, I don't usually get this brain fog. And then I saw like it had, I think it had cornstarch in it. You know, and I know sort of from my work with the food intolerances around like corn can be an inflammatory. And I thought, okay, that's something that I know I can't eat. You know, it doesn't agree with me. And it just gives me this brain fog. And all I want to do is just sleep. And I just find it really hard to just wake up and like really get that clarity, you know, and that was another, I guess, key that I found myself when I realized that I couldn't tolerate wheat and gluten, that I would just have this brain fog and just like, it's sort of like, oh, I can't snap out of it. Whereas when I cut the gluten and the wheat out of my diet, I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain feels clean. It feels clear. It's sort of like when you've decluttered rather than all the clutter hanging around. It's a really weird feeling.
Got rid of the cobwebs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to stop the sharing so then hopefully people can see us. I don't know if people could still see us ordinarily, but hopefully we're back on the screen now. Yeah, and I also loved one of the other snippets that you had about sleep as a form of relaxation, that we need to be relaxed to sleep. You know, the feet up the wall, the yoga pose, the child pose. There's another one, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, who's an obstetrician and gynecologist from the US, and she's done a lot of work around hormones and like balancing our hormones and the need for sleep, pretty much the stuff that you're talking about. And she's also a yoga instructor, so I think hers is a butterfly pose as well that she does. And like I've done it, I'm like, oh, this is so nice. Just, it's so relaxing, you know. And it's so important, because if your brain's racing and you, depending on the thoughts that you're having as well, is really going to affect how easily we're going to get to sleep and whether we're going to be able to stay asleep as well.
Yeah, it's like a stepping stone to get there.
Yeah.
really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
And just making 5-10 minutes to do it.
Yep. It's really easy. And like the swaps. And I know your bliss balls, are they the ones that you were working on before our conference had to be rescheduled, and you're working on those bliss balls?
Yeah, they're different ones. These are sleepy ones that I've got.
Okay. Oh, good. Yep. So we'll have to sample those as well. So, and obviously, I mean, you've provided some great resources as well. I've actually written down the websites that you've got there, the Healthy Lunchbox and the Eat Well 101. So I'm going to check those out myself with all of those. So, yeah, I mean, there's some absolutely invaluable information again, but really easy to understand and very easy shifts that you can make. And I think given, you know, our amazing veterinary profession that typically lunch breaks are a rarity. And I mean, I know obviously for our psychological well-being, and obviously, you know, from our nutritional well-being, the importance of having those breaks. You know, we have to stop and restore our body. We can't just keep going on autopilot all the time. You know, it's not going to sustain us long term. So I think, yeah, you've covered that. You provided some awesome information. It was absolutely fabulous. And I'm sort of like, I was so excited because I'm like, oh, this is listening to all of this and getting all of this information. And it's something, as I said, we can all do. It's easy. There's easy shifts. We're not asking people to go out and run marathons or anything like that to get tired enough to want to sleep. You know, these are really quick and easy little shifts and steps that you can take. So
yeah, we want to make it easy. We want to make it easy.
Absolutely. Otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
definitely. So thank you so much. We're so thrilled to have you on board as well. And I know that some of our followers would have seen you at the conference that we did last year with the AEC, the Love Yourself Masterclass. That was when we first got to meet as well. And I know that, yeah, the presentation there, everyone loved it. So it's great. And then for anyone, I know that there's already people registered and signed up, but the Reach Out Wellbeing Conference for Veterinary Professionals, we did have to postpone it because of all the COVID-19 stuff that's going on and the restrictions. So at this stage, it's scheduled for the 5th and 6th of September. And Audra is going to be one of our amazing guest speakers there to share a lot more about these topics here. So if you want to sort of learn more and find out more, then, you know, that's another option. But obviously you had the contact details there. So if anyone does want to get in touch with Audra, you know, and if you want to work with her or engage Audra to come and do webinars for your own clinics or practices, or you want to, you know, find out more information privately, you know, absolutely would encourage you to get in touch and to share that information. Yeah, and take it seriously, because again, your well-being could absolutely thrive as a result. You know, and as I said, it may not necessarily be something psychological going on. It could be something as simple, and I say as simple because it is quite simple what we put in our mouth, that could actually be having some of those effects. So I think it's also quite encouraging as well. So yeah, so thanks again, for being part of our Thriving and Surviving in the Veterinary Profession webinar mini series that we're doing. We've got a whole host of guest speakers coming up over the next few weeks, just covering different topics, different themes that hopefully everyone will find invaluable. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch, pop some comments there in the comments box if you're following on Facebook, or just get in touch through our website as well, and we'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as we can. So thanks again, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.